You know, so many of our long distance trails are sort of routed into these like pristine wilderness areas, which almost feel like a little bit of a lie. You know, like the world isn't actually really like that. And we've had to fight really hard to keep those wilderness areas wild. One of the things that drew me to the PNT was just this question of what is it like to hike what the world really is, which is actually just a mess of like, you know, protected land and logged land and farming land and urban areas. I feel like that's actually part of what makes it so interesting. It does have this unique quality of like hiking the world as it is, kind of.
In 1976, Ron Strickland, who was the founder of the Pacific Northwest Trail, actually got a senator from Idaho, Senator Sims, to introduce legislation, and a joint feasibility study by the Department of Interior and Department of Agriculture found at that time that it wasn't feasible. Then in 2007, Ron Strickland and Tom Gilbert sat down and we decided that if I could find congressman and a senator, Tom would write the legislation and we would go ahead and pursue the National Scenic Trail status again. With Cantwell introducing it in the Senate and Dix in the House. It passed the Senate very easily, and then in March of 2009, President Obama signed it into law.
When Ron Strickland first was putting this together, he was sort of doing it piecewise and hadn't quite, or at least this is my understanding, hadn't quite figured out if you're continuously, you know, if you're gonna hike the whole thing, one end to the other, dealing with all of the seasonal constraints, like where does it have to be a continually hikeable long distance trail? It's more roads than most of the other trails. And I think at this point, that's one of the things, like other long distance hikers I know who have thought about the PNT and decided not to hike it, it's because of the road walking. And I think they're sort of waiting until that gets sort of fixed somehow.
If the landowner is willing to sell the property, the trail can purchase it if they can come up with the money. The biggest problem is it takes 3 to 5 years to get money out of Congress. So, you know, it's going to take, I mean, the Pacific Crest Trail has been in existence since 1968. They still have land issues in California and stuff that they're dealing with. So it's nothing that's going to happen overnight. But we're probably a year and a half away from making any really serious changes to the trail corridor. It's not something that the clouds open up and dollars start falling out and you can do all this work. You know, the volunteers are the lifeblood of all of the trail organizations. And it doesn't matter whether it's the Pacific Northwest Trail, the Pacific Crest, the Appalachian. You get a lot of volunteer groups. We have a great one here in Skagit County, Skagit-Whatcom Island Trail Maintenance Group that has been maintaining this stretch of trail for, going back into the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. And each volunteer hour that they put out there is worth about $22 an hour. You know, if it wasn't for volunteers, the people in the United States wouldn't have trails to hike on.
The general ambiguity so many of us live with about what's the point of our lives, kind of, is really resolved nicely for the duration of a long distance hike. Because the point of your life is, in the most general sense, to get from here to there, and along the way keep yourself alive.
My dream for the trail is to see the trail completed from Chief Mountain Customs to Cape Alava on the Olympic Peninsula. I think Ron and I share the same vision as far as we feel very happy that the trail is now designated and it's under federal law. I mean, that was Ron's dream from the start, and I completed it for him. And that's not going to change. The trail is going to be there. But it's not going to be completed in my lifetime.